Okay, hi, I'm Laurie Hurson. I'm an open educational technologist in the Teaching and Learning Center at the Graduate Center. I am talking about using domains with graduate students. My opening slide should actually be all of those people also, because this is not just my project. Matt Gold, Luke Walter, Lisa Rohde, and Kristen Hackett also worked on this project with me. And a better title for this project would be Sitting Around in a Room for 5 months with these people talking, because we were never able to actually agree on anything. But we're getting there, and we're going to get some feedback today, and I'll probably pose more questions than I actually answer. But for those of you who don't know CUNY, it's a special, messy, Wild West kind of place. There's 11 senior colleges, there's 7 community colleges, there's 7 graduate schools. I'm here representing one of them, which is the CUNY Graduate Center, which does a lot of the PhD granting programs, as Jim just alluded to. I don't think we kicked you out. You can come back.
Yeah, thank you.
So our question is, we're supporting mostly graduate students. We have a lot of programs that graduate students are in, but we have had this larger push within the Graduate Center to build open infrastructure for different needs. And part of that is open educational resources, but even before that, you saw the CUNY Academic Commons, which is a big WordPress installation that started at the Graduate Center that now has over 16,000 users and tons of sites that are run by programs, departments for research, academic portfolios for faculty. And actually about 3 years ago, it started in 2009, 3 years ago, we opened it up to teaching. So any one of the 250,000 staff or faculty members at CUNY can use it for their class, and any of their students can also sign up to take a class that is hosted on the CUNY Academic Commons. Students can build portfolios, much like a lot of the projects we've seen today with students building in their domains. That's actually why I have my job, because someone needs to support all those people using the CUNY Academic Commons, and that's why I'm here today. But it is WordPress, and so we have a lot going on there. And then we also have a new project called Manifold Scholarship, which is basically a publishing platform for open source texts, and so that's starting to be used more widely at the Graduate Center. But what we saw, what's also happening at the Graduate Center is you have the Masters in Digital Humanities becoming huge. This Graduate Center digital initiatives where students are signing up and taking a series of courses where they have to produce a digital project that can be on WordPress, but more and more we have students using ArcGIS, Omeka, Scalar, R, Python. We have a huge Python users group. And so there was this kind of lack of tech infrastructure to be supporting the kinds of digital projects that are starting to come out of the CUNY Graduate Center that the Commons and Manifold really can't answer to. So our plan was, what's my next slide here? I knew about domains. Luke, Walter, and Matt Gold, and Lisa Rohde are aware of domains, so it was like, why don't we spin something like this up here at the Grad Center? So Kristen Hackett and I were kind of tasked with thinking through how this might come to life for graduate students. And we had guiding questions that are very similar to some of the things that I've been hearing a lot of you talk about today, and I'm learning so much about. What do you need to get up and running with a domains instance? Kind of what types of access do administrators and users need? And I think one of the biggest tensions in that room, and why we sat in that room for what seems like forever, really 5 months, was how do we integrate it with the already existing digital technology infrastructure that's at CUNY. We have this huge multi-site WordPress install, and the Commons was really built, because I have mentioned how big CUNY is, the Commons was built to connect people across CUNY, develop communities, put people in contact with, maybe you work out in Queens, how do you get to know someone who's doing the same research at the Graduate Center? So the Commons was an answer to this community building tool. And the tension that we had kind of in this room around domains was, how do you see what other people are working on? Once someone gets siloed into their own domains project, how do we make those other projects, those other digital projects discoverable? I think Tim just answered my question, so I'm going to be following you around for the rest of the conference. But it's starting to answer that question. But how do we build a community around these digital projects that people are creating? With Omeka, with Scalar, and make them actually discoverable. So we kind of got hung up on these technical and institutional questions. And at the same time, graduate students are doing all sorts of work that they're going to need to take with them for a long time. And also graduate students in graduate school for like 10 years. Hi, that's me. I'm still there. And so it's it's not just 4 years, it's not 2 years, or then they're done with a class. They might start with a reclaim. So we have several reclaim hosting spaces, which we're now starting to give out. But then how do you know if they're still using them? How do you know how long they're going to use them? Maybe they don't need it in year 2, but they're going to need it in year 5. And so what does sort of the institutional administration look like when you're handing out these reclaim spaces? So we started by making this reclaim hosting users group. We didn't call it domains because we're not domains yet. We don't have that sort of administrative infrastructure. It's really just me and Kristen sitting back there answering people's questions. And we wanted to figure out how to start connecting the CUNY Commons to it. So this commons space has started to become a place where people who are using reclaim accounts can talk and where the community can start. I'll come back to that in a second. But what we actually did is Kristen and I were like, the 5 of us sitting in this room aren't getting anywhere because there's only 2 graduate students and we don't know the needs of all graduate students. So we started a focused inquiry group with 6 other graduate students from various places throughout the Graduate Center. So someone from Career Services, someone from Kathy Davidson's Futures Initiative, someone from the TLC, someone from the Graduate Center Digital Fellows. So all of these graduate students who might be plugged into the digital projects that are coming out of the GC, and then we made them come into a room and talk to us forever about what might happen. And we also had them do what was really enlightening, this sort of reflective journaling process. These students also had very varied, that's, I meant to say that, ability and knowledge of what Reclaim can offer. Some of them had never seen cPanel before, but for us, it's really important to give graduate students access to that cPanel, first of all, because we don't want to administer it, and we want people to be able to explore on their own. So we sent our focus group participants into their newly spun up cPanel reclaim space, and we're like, please explore and journal for us as you go through this. Here's some questions that we want you to think about as you're exploring cPanel. Some of you know what you're doing, some of you don't. But I love some of these answers because I've used some of these before. Some of them are intuitive, but others I have no idea what they do. I'm not clicking on databases because that seems scary, right? We all kind of feel that way when we first go in there. And then other students who had done web design before were like, this is cool, I never use this, no one needs that. And so we'd ask them, do you think it makes sense to have like a cPanel for new graduate students that only has 4 apps, right, and all the functions? Does it make sense to then have an advanced user and a super user level that can see everything? We kind of nixed that actually by the end because we were like, that shuts down the options for possibility. And so just giving people a totally open cPanel with all the possibilities there might lead to some really interesting projects. But by the end of it, we had these students write up kind of what would be needed to set up programming and support and levels of documentation for students from the areas of the Graduate Center where we think these projects might be coming out of. So our Master's in Liberal Studies and DH programs for first and second year grad students, what would it look like for more advanced students, and what would these students need to know if they were given a reclaim space when they came into grad school. So where did we end up? Well, kind of where we started, honestly. We have to have some sort of process for account distribution and renewal, which we have set up in place now, because I think at this point we're much smaller. We probably only have 40 reclaim spaces running with graduate students start spinning up projects, but we're now tracking them and making sure we know when to renew, because it's only for a year. We're going to do a year each time, and our idea is if you're not using that space, we're going to recycle it for someone else, because graduate students can fall off the face of the earth for 3 years if they choose to. That's why grad school's great. But then how do we expand the support? Right now it's me sitting back there. So the Reclaim Hosting Users Group is becoming really important, and also giving an answer to that kind of lack of community, or not lack of community you would see in domains, but the siloing. So if you're doing something on a reclaim space, can you tell us about it in order to get your account opened up? So like write us a little blurb about your project, tell us what your domain is going to be, and then when you have problems, you can absolutely ask Jim and Tim, but if you want to ask us in our CUNY Commons group first, we're there, and we can maybe walk you through it. And it also helps us know what's going on with all these reclaim spaces that we're giving out. So we call this the RUG group, which is kind of silly. RUG, Reclaim Hosting Users Group, with this cat sitting on a rug. One of the important things that is coming out of that too is student governance. We didn't want this to become a totally institutionalized space that was managed only by the TLC or only by GC digital initiatives. This was not actually my idea. This came very strongly out of the focus group of graduate students who were like, I want to stay involved with how this gets implemented. And we were like, okay, we can figure out how to do that, but we need to develop some sort of community around this, so the Commons has also helped facilitating that. Next steps, we're trying to get it integrated into the digital research initiative that the Graduate Center Digital Initiatives runs. That's a confusing statement. But we run workshops all year. The TLC and the GCDI run workshops, so we're going to integrate Reclaim hosting workshops for getting your site up and running or your Reclaim space up and running. So in order to get a Reclaim space with us, you would have to come to one of those workshops, and then we'll give you an account then. Kind of like I saw the Domainosaur presentation earlier, so kind of like giving out a Domainosaur, except where you're coming to our workshop and we'll give it to you then. But maybe we can get some cool merch like that. And then, you know, other questions that we'll have to answer along the way. How do you integrate it actually into the Digital Humanities curriculum potentially, or we have an Interactive Technology and Pedagogy certificate, and can you make having a Reclaim space and spinning up your digital project or your final portfolio in Reclaim part of the final aspects of those courses? And then as students maybe continue to use these, how do you move their scholarship out? How do you export it? How do you make sure that you can just transfer it to them if they want to do that, or if they want to take it somewhere else? How do we start putting together those processes? And then just sustainability, and then technical integration with the CUNY Commons. That's our main thing. It's last because it's kind of the most important, and I can never forget about it, and Matt and Luke will never let me forget. But so I'm very interested in figuring out actual technical processes, kind of like what we saw in the last presentation, of maybe creating a space, Matt would really like to call it Commons Labs, where things that are produced through a Reclaim hosting space or through a domain space is then through some sort of API displayed as in part of the Commons, right? As part of the Commons community. You can see these are all the projects that are produced in a domains or Reclaim space. So that's where we are. Thank you all for listening. It's great to be here.
So we definitely have time for questions. I can lead the way, and then you will think about yours. Would one of the ways to think about what you're doing with integrating various Reclaim hosting installs, like Tim said, be to pull it in, because you have a site-wide feed of recent posts through an RSS feed or something where you kind of scrape that stuff. Would that be possible, given you have 40 or so accounts right now that you're tracking?
Yeah, we could start testing it with those, I imagine. I think the problem is what do and I wonder if we talked about this, the projects that are in the Reclaim or domain spaces, what kinds of things are they producing that can be pulled? Because it's like the Instalatron gives you a notification of someone, you know, installed Scalar. But after that, there's no feed of which to pull updates unless it's like just this project was updated. And maybe that's how they get filtered, right? The projects that were most recently updated get kicked to the top. But I think that was like, what's hooked? What kind of data are we pulling in? I think that was one of our main questions.
Yeah, that's a great one. We had talked with your college about building in that integration years ago, so that might be worth revisiting. Sorry, Tim. I'm sorry. Questions? All right.
It's all good. Okay.
So, clearly it's like a much bigger school and everything, and there's a lot of different schools within it. Are your graduate students typically like on campus and on ground, or is it like a hybrid, or are they online? I'm just wondering, as a grad student that's been doing online asynchronous.
Graduate students who are taking classes are mostly at the Graduate Center. Sometimes CUNY's graduate school classes are at other CUNY campuses in the city. But it's very transient, right? It's not like they're coming to a campus with a lawn and are hanging out in the Grad Center all day. It's like crazy New York City.
Yeah. So like branching that out though, how do you think you're going to be able to reach all of those people? Is it spread out?
Yeah, I mean, we can get them when they're in the Grad Center. So a lot of those workshops in the digital research institutes that we run are all run out of the Grad Center, so we can get them there. And then hopefully through the CUNY Academic Commons we can capture them, because our hope is that to get a domain, they would also become part of that sort of online community, so we're catching them in both spaces.
It's funny because doesn't, in some ways, WordPress.com right now do exactly what you all are thinking about. Like, whether you have your own domain somewhere or a WordPress.com site, all of the stuff through Jetpack and all that is pretty much the same, and that's a community you're still connected with, whether it's self-hosted or through them. And that's kind of the predicament you find yourself in with the CUNY Academic Commons and the domain space. And I wonder if there's some, similar to what Tim built, but like there's some way of thinking through how they built Calypso is what they call it, as a way to deal with it.
It may be even easier than that. I'm not real sure it'll apply, but check out the distributor plugin. And I'm blanking out on the firm that built it. Tom, do you know what I'm talking about? Distributor?
Some of that syndication stuff.
Yeah, it's a syndication thing. It's like next generation, way beyond feed WordPress. I'll get you a link to it. Yeah, distributor.
Yeah.
It's not in the repository because they didn't want to handle it that way, but it is free open. And it's for connecting all kinds of sites and distributing content, and oftentimes two ways.
It represents a really fascinating and interesting tension between a WordPress multi-site and a domain of one's own, and where the two cross over and where they're separate. So
yeah, and I think domains offer so much possibility because graduate students are have been using WordPress, but also are moving beyond it, right? With the R and the Python and Omeka and Scalar and these other sorts of digital tools. And so how do we build a bridge between all of these digital projects into one kind of discoverable place?
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Laurie, very much for everything.
Thank you, Jim.